grassroots effort. There is no Houthi lobby in America, okay? It was grassroots efforts by libertarians, Quakers, and leftists to get war powers resolutions introduced in Trump's first term to stop the war in Yemen, which was launched not for Israel, for Saudi Arabia and UAE by Barack Obama in 2015. That's not a first. The Afghan war wasn't about Israel either. Okay, but this Yemen war was...
I thought 9/11 was about Israel.
Well, it was in great part, but the decision to sack Kabul and do a regime change and all that had nothing to do with the Likud whatsoever, other than, well, we got to keep the war going long enough to go to Baghdad.
Oh, okay. So it was Israel's fault.
I was in the middle of saying about the war in Yemen that we got the war powers resolution through twice, and Trump vetoed it twice. And his man, Pete Navarro, explained to the New York Times that this was just welfare for American industry. A lot of industrialists were angry about the tariffs disrupting trade with China, and somehow they substituted Raytheon for all American industry somehow and said industry will be happy if we funnel a lot of money to Raytheon. That's Pete Navarro talking to the New York Times about why they continued the war in Yemen throughout Trump's entire first term. He had no interest in it at all. The whole thing was it was Obama's fault. The whole thing was essentially on autopilot. And what was he doing? He's flying as Al-Qaeda's Air Force against the Houthis, who originally, if you go back to January of 2015, America was passing intelligence to the Houthis to use to kill Al-Qaeda. You know, AQAP, the guys that tried to blow up the plane over Detroit with the underpants bomb on Christmas Day 2009, that did all those horrific massacres in Europe, real-ass bin Ladenite terrorists. The Houthis were our allies against them before Barack Obama stabbed them in the back. And why did Trump keep that going when he inherited that horrific war from Barack Obama? Why did he do it? According to his trade guy, so that they could keep funneling American taxed and inflated dollars into the pocketbooks of stockholders of Raytheon Incorporated.
Right. Military-industrial complex. The point was made.
Yeah, maybe I could respond to that. Because, I mean, again, it's always America's fault, according to Scott.
Let's take a jab at it.
No, but it's
Saudi and UAE asked Barack Obama for permission to start that war and for American help in prosecuting it, and he said yes, and helped them
I'm going to segue into an answer, because I think it deserves an answer. A military-industrial complex is a serious concern. Because I think you're right. The bigger it gets, and the more weapons you have, you think the greater the temptation to use it, right? I think that's sort of the argument. And then there's also self-enrichment and how much money can be made, and all of that, I think, is of serious concern to people. Look, I think Trump is somebody who, it's hard pressed to say that Donald Trump is a great advocate of the military-industrial complex, or that he is in their pocket, the same way that he's in the pocket of the Israelis and in the pocket of the Saudis and in the pocket of everybody. I mean, I think the one thing with Trump is that he has learned the lessons of American engagement over the past few decades. And I think Scott's done a good job of kind of laying out the mistakes that have been made, even though, we can discuss about causal connections and who's responsible. And, I lean on...
Can we? I want to.
Well, Scott, can I finish? Because, your causal connection is always, it's America aggressing, Israel aggressing, and all these poor people responding to us. But nonetheless, I think Trump he's learned the lessons, but he hasn't overlearned the lessons. He's not paralyzed by Iraq or Afghanistan or the mistakes made by his predecessors. He understands that at the end of the day, we need serious American power. We need lethal power. We need forward deterrence. And he's been very careful and very selective about how he uses American power. I mean, we've talked about it throughout this whole conversation. Trump used American power to kill Qasem Soleimani, one of the world's most dangerous terrorists. He killed Baghdadi, the head of ISIS, one of the world's most dangerous terrorists. He refrained from going after the Iranian takedown of our drone. He refrained from when the Iranians fired on Saudi Aramco and took off 20% of our oil. Right? He's been very, very selective about the use of American power. He did go after the Houthis, who are Iran-backed, and were using Iranian missiles to go after our ships.
That's not true. Those are North Korean missiles, completely debunked by Jane's Defense Weekly. Right. Nice try.
Yeah, nice try. Anyway, everybody knows that the Iranians have been financing the Houthis. Hezbollah has been training the Houthis, and Iran has given capabilities to the Houthis to develop their own indigenous missile capability. The fact of the matter is, he did, in a way, go after the Houthis much more intensively than Biden did in order to prevent them from continuing to shut down Red Sea shipping, on which both America and our allies depend as a trade route. He actually did it quite successfully, because after a few days of pretty intensive bombing, the Houthis got the message and they cut a deal with Donald Trump. They're not going to interfere with our ships anymore.
He cut a deal with them. They kept bombing Israel, which is what got him involved in the first place. He completely backed out. Sounds to me like they won and he backed down.
Well, it sounds like he, in terms of promoting American national security interests, sounds like he did a pretty good job of sending a message to the Houthis and the Iranians. Don't mess with the United States. And that gets us to the contemporary reality. He took a decision one day to send our B-2s and our subs in order to do severe damage to 3 nuclear facilities. It was a one-day campaign. It was selective. It was narrow. It was overwhelming. And I think it sends a message to Khamenei. I think it sends a message to regimes around the world, anti-American regimes around the world, that Donald Trump has not overlearned the lessons of the past 20 years, right? But that in fact, he is not going to dismantle the US military and dismantle our nuclear program and fly around to all these cities and call peace conferences and hope that these dictators will just sit down with America and say, you know what? All is forgiven, the United States of America. It's all your fault. You did this all. We admit our responsibility, and then we have peace and paradise on earth. I think Trump is much more pragmatic and, in some respects, cynical when he looks at the world and he realizes the world is a dangerous place. I have to be very careful about how I use American military forces. I am not going to send hundreds of thousands of people around the world. By the way, I mean, you all talk about Israel. I mean, the Israelis are one of the best allies we could possibly have. They fight and they die in their own defense. They fought multiple wars against American enemies. They haven't asked for American troops on the ground. There are no boots on the ground in Israel defending Israel. The best we've given them is we've given them a THAAD system to help them shoot down ballistic missiles that are aimed at them. And our American pilots have been in the air recently with our Israeli friends shooting down ballistic missiles. But the Israelis have had a warrior ethos. We will fight and we will die in our own defense. I would just say, if you're going to actually build out a model where you're going to minimize the risk to American troops, let's find more allies like that, right? I'm like Scott, I really worry about China-Taiwan. I really, really worry about that because the Taiwanese are not capable of defending themselves without U.S. assistance. And we may have to send American men and women to go defend Taiwan, and we can have a whole debate about the wisdom of that. But again, it would be very, very helpful to have more Israels in the world, more countries that are capable of fighting against common enemies and against common threats without having to always put American boots on the ground in order to do that.